Hello, friends. I am Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and we are continuing our series on suicide and suicide prevention. So, today I wanted to talk about the steps that occur from basically the time someone enters emotional pain to when they might attempt suicide. So, whenever somebody starts in emotional pain, they don't just jump straight there. There's a few steps that you go through. So we're just going to broad stroke through those in order. If a person's going to start considering suicide, the first place they go is what's called passive suicidal ideation, passive suicidal thoughts. And what that means is that they have a suicidal thought that's kind of out of the blue, but it doesn't really have a lot of intent around it. It has no intent around it usually, really no plan, and it's kind of circumstantial. So if somebody's just having a string of bad days, or maybe even bad month, bad few months, at some point they might just be standing on the corner waiting across the street. They see a bus coming, and the thought flits through their head of, man, I'm having some crappy days. Wouldn't it be nice to just step out, let the bus hit me, and be done? And then nothing really happens. They go on with their day. That's called a passive suicidal ideation. Or it might take the form of, oh my gosh, it would be so nice to just not be here anymore, to not be alive anymore. And the reason it's called passive is because the person's not really actively thinking about it. Just they're in pain, they're in distress, and their brain is trying to solve it. And at some point they kind of realize, oh yeah, if I wasn't alive anymore, my problem would not exist anymore. So most people who've ever come into the counseling office have experienced passive suicidal ideation. It is to be treated seriously. And we do always, if we discover passive suicidal ideations, we always keep an eye on it and just check in on it every now and again. But a lot of times that's as far as it goes, especially because somebody's come in, they're starting to get the help, they're starting to turn it around, so there's no need for it to ever go further. Usually, if passive suicidal ideation becomes active suicidal ideation, which is the next step, it's because they've tried some things and nothing has gone well. Stuff hasn't started to turn around. So, if things don't turn around, a lot of times people arrive at active suicidal ideation, which is when people start kind of thinking more clearly about, okay, what would it be like to just not be here? And they start kind of like doing pros and cons and thinking about, man, my life really isn't all that good right now. Maybe this is something to think about. So now, instead of it just flitting through their brain and flitting back out, now they're starting to actually pay attention to it. And once a person enters active suicidal ideation, my absolute belief is if they're not with a skilled clinician, then they absolutely need to be, because as soon as you start doing cost-benefit analysis of whether you should be alive or not, that's when things are starting. Well, number one, the emotional pain is absolutely clear. Like some people can just have a bad day and maybe have a passive suicidal ideation. If a person's having active suicidal ideations, they are starting to be in pretty intense pain, and they've probably been in it for a while. So no matter what, my belief is if a person is experiencing active suicidal ideation, they need to be with a clinician and be getting some help. But so that's the next step, is they start thinking about the cost benefit of, should I be alive or not? And then the next step is when it starts to get serious. They start formulating a plan, and they start kind of deciding, okay, well, if I was going to kill myself, here is how I would do it. Anytime a person is starting to formulate a plan, number one, they need to be with a clinician, and they need to be informing that clinician, because as soon as a plan is starting to form, that means whatever that person is doing to try and solve their emotional pain is clearly not working. And once we start getting into the plan area, this is when it starts to become a crisis. The reason it starts to become a crisis is once a plan is complete, like, okay, I have decided if I want to do it one day, here is how I would do it. Once the plan is decided and the person is continuing to think about, should I kill myself? The next step is to have suicidal intent. And most of the time, if a person has selected lethal means for their plan, we don't get an opportunity to intervene once intent occurs. Either the loved ones, the clinicians, because if a person has selected a lethal plan, if they wake up one day with suicidal intent and they decide to enact their plan, it can be 10 minutes between the time intent started and that person is dead. So that's why I say as soon as a plan starts to form, this is the crisis area where if you're the loved one, you absolutely need to be getting them in to see somebody. You absolutely need to be doing everything you can to be loving and supportive. Hopefully you've seen the video how the loved one can be supportive to somebody experiencing suicidal ideation. If you're the person who is maybe suicidal, if you're starting to formulate a plan, please tell someone. Call the National Suicide Helpline. Call your clinician if you have one. Get an appointment with a clinician if you don't have one. Tell a loved one. Tell several loved ones. If a plan is starting to form, then a crisis is beginning. So I'm almost leaving intent out as a step. It is a step, but basically, since sometimes we don't even get the opportunity to intervene, then I'm basically kind of stopping at plan, because that's the last time we know we'll have the opportunity to intervene. So your steps are passive suicidal ideation. Most of us have that one. It needs to be treated seriously, but it's not. We're not yet heading to an emergency. Active suicidal ideation. Person starting to do the cost benefit of should I be alive? Absolutely. If reaching out is not occurring, it needs to occur from every end. The clinician, if they know about it, needs to be checking in with that person. The person with suicidal ideations needs to be reaching out to people everywhere. So, and then as soon as a plan starts to form, this is the part where we're getting into a crisis. We really need to get this individual some help and get it quickly. Even if that involves voluntary hospitalization. Or sometimes, depending on where you're at, you can sometimes do involuntary hospitalization. But voluntary is better, first off. And second off, if you're the person experiencing suicidal ideation, it's far better to do a brief voluntary hospitalization and keep yourself alive so that you can get the help. Because, like we said in one of our other videos, almost all the time this is solvable. So it would be a terrible shame to do the ultimate permanent solution to a temporary and solvable problem. So hopefully knowing these steps is helpful to somebody out there. Hopefully this information is usable to someone. Thank you so much for listening to me on this very important subject. I am Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and I will see you in the next video.